Well,
Let's start with one and build.
I think bicycle share is an easy win. I think that having bicycles available for people to take those kind of medium range trips is a great thing. But we have to put in a better bicycle network in order for people to feel comfortable riding bicycle share. And especially with all the tourists we have, it needs to be intuitive and get people from where they want to go safely. And so there's sort of a chicken and the egg. So we got to do bicycle share. We got to have more bicycle lanes out there in the road. We need to look at, maybe there's some roads that where the traffic count is low, but the road is really wide and could offer some space for a protected bicycle lane. Ringling Boulevard has come up a couple times out in the public. When Jeff Speck, walkability expert, was here in Sarasota speaking a few months ago, he mentioned, I don't know if he mentioned it in the public meeting, but we had a meeting with him the next day, staff, to talk about his talk, and he said, well, if you have a place with a lot of room, maybe you should try testing that temporarily to see how it works. Ringling Boulevard would connect where the Legacy Trail is being extended in Paint Park all the way to downtown Sarasota area. And it is pretty wide. There doesn't tend to be a ton of cars on it most of the time. So it might be a place where we could test it out for like a couple months and see if people use it, if they like that. That's something we're gonna look at. So that's 3. I don't know if I can get to 5 right now, but
Okay.
here.
Somebody has listed a complex path for somebody from Longboat Key if they were going to avail themselves of a water taxi and then sharing a ride, or taking a bus to shopping and then having to turn around and go back through that kind of a complex path.
It's a lot of steps.
Yeah, that's a lot of coordinations and a lot of difficulties.
Yeah.
And of course, in a very urban environment, you often would have that with subway connections and things like that. So people do adapt to that, but we're in size, about the size of Manhattan. So in theory, those kinds of pathways could be established. It's a lot of work, and I think the community would have to show a real need for scheduling of that. But that's part of the process that's going to be going on. This is a 20-year plan that they're developing, and the meetings are going to be for people to put in questions like this, so it can be analyzed.
I would say something that could make that process easier is if all of that stuff could be done in one app. So if all of that was integrated, so you just have to pay one time instead of having to, switch, get your bus ticket, switch, pay for your parking, switch, pay for the water taxi. If all of that was integrated into one app, that would probably help that work a little bit better. So,
and there are communities that are doing that. There are communities that have a telephone app that you can coordinate all of your tickets to different kinds of transportation without having to stop and buy a ticket in any one of them.
Yeah, it's best practice for sure. There's a lot of cities doing that. And if you think of the octopus card in Hong Kong, that's what they have. All kinds of modes of transportation in just one car.
There's some in the United States too. When will the changes to 10th Street and 14th Street be complete?
Hopefully early 2020 is when DOT has promised us that project will be finished. So we're all looking forward to that. We'll have some more roundabouts under construction though right around the same time. So just to give you guys a sense of timing, the roundabout at Fruitville and 41 should be under construction early this summer, and it should take about 1.5 years to complete. So it's a little bit faster than these two. DOT's had to maintain traffic and not close any lanes the entire time that these have been under construction, which is part of what's taken so long. With the roundabout at Fruitville and 41, the Quay, since they're building the roundabout for us, are actually letting traffic come onto their property so that they're able to maintain the flow of traffic the whole time. So that is, that's going to happen. The roundabout at Gulfstream and 41 is planned to be under construction once the roundabout at Fruitville and 41 is completed. We don't want to have that whole area torn up at the same time. That would make it very difficult to get around because you can't avoid having construction during the season as much as we'd like to. So that's the schedule right now.
I have a question about parking garages. Is this your forte?
I'll do my best.
Okay.
I'm not a parking expert, but
Okay.
I can always ask Mark Lyons if I need to.
Right. Regarding parking garages, do you think no new parking garages should be allowed unless they have level slope, or rather than sloping floors, so that they can maybe repurposed into some other use when automobile cars become not being used very much?
That's a great question. This is definitely something that's being talked about as far as best practices as we prepare for automated vehicles, because whether we like it or not, they're coming. It's just a question of how long. So having structures that are flexible, like a parking garage that could also double as housing at some point, or something else, is a really good idea. I think it's very expensive, but that doesn't mean it should be out of the question. We're also looking at this for curb space. So, speaking of parking, people are getting more and more deliveries. We've got Uber Eats, we've got Bite Squad, we've got Amazon delivering to you within 2 days, sometimes faster. And there's just a lot more deliveries happening than there used to be. And sometimes that can cause more congestion. So we're going to be looking, especially downtown, but we'll also look in other parts of the city where we can have more of a shared curb space. So for a loading zone for deliveries and that type of thing. So that's just, some ideas about flexible use of space as we prepare for automated vehicles and ride sharing and all that good stuff.
Regarding the intersection at Orange and Mound, are there plans for a continuous flow intersection there where it really is needed? Would they, let me see, would the projections be on the basis of current use or projections as to what 5 or 10 years from now it would be?
Okay. Well, I know that intersection has been looked at for a roundabout in the past. It was it was actually a project that was funded in the MPO's short-range transportation plan, and that funding got bumped to a different project, and that one was taken off the table. But it was part of the city's Bayfront connectivity plan many years ago. And so it's one that's been studied a lot. I think it's, anything is on the table with it, especially something that's been in the plans for that long. I know that that's been, a complicated project because of some concerns from the neighborhoods adjacent to it, and the concern about that impacting traffic through the neighborhood, and I get that. But that might make it safer for people to cross on foot at that intersection, and in that case, it's something that we should look at because of our status as a dangerous place for pedestrians. So
I can comment on a couple of things with that intersection. The most effective placement of a roundabout is when you have a lot of traffic turning left through an intersection. It takes away the worst crash statistics and reduces it, makes it safer, and makes it low. If there you have most of your traffic coming south on Orange going left. That's coming north on Orange is either going straight or left, which would be very significant for the application of a roundabout. One of the things that would be an advantage for a neighborhood to have a roundabout in that situation is if people can get through that intersection quickly, which roundabouts will do, there's no need for them to try and take an alternate route.
Yeah,
and that's something people don't ever think about. And I've studied roundabouts extensively since the 1990s, so I've watched a lot of the literature and the development and the engineering of them, and can jump in and pretty well cite you some sources for information on that. Does the traffic plan in motion treat existing planned but unbuilt projects as, having trouble reading, what do you think that is?
Legacy?
Legacy given projects, or will a planned projects be canceled or sustainably revised? In other words, will projects that have been planned for a long time be adapted to the changes? And why? There's a second question we'll get to if you want to address that.
The short answer is I don't know yet. I mean, it will probably depend on the status of the project. If it's already funded and it's about, the design is finalized and it's moving through construction, it would hold up the project in order to redesign it. But if there's serious public concern about some part of the design, I think that we could look at that. I know, so I'll use an example of something that happened while I was at the NPO. The US 41 bypass in Venice was already, parts of it were under construction. The design was mostly finalized, but the state updated their complete streets design guidelines before that design had been finished, and they added a buffered bicycle lane on the street as part of their new standard. And that the buffer just striping right next to you. So there's a 4-foot bicycle lane and a 3-foot striped buffer that is supposed to kind of symbolize the 3 feet that a vehicle should leave between you and a bicycle. So when that was adopted, even though the design had already been finished for the Venice bypass, the MPO board asked DOT to consider adding the protected bicycle, or the buffered bicycle lanes to the project, and that actually made the project better by providing an area for bicyclists where they would feel a little more protected. So I think if that were the case with something that we already have planned, sure, we could consider adapting the project.
Their second question is, why connect schools and park sidewalks first? What's the logic behind doing that?
I believe, and I'm not the one who, this policy was in place before I was there, but the sidewalk connectivity plan does prioritize connections to schools and connections to parks, because I think of the idea that children are using that sidewalk, and they are some of the most vulnerable users of our transportation network. So if they're on foot, we want to make sure that they have a sidewalk available to them, if we can do it. But certainly there are other users of schools and parks besides kids, and that those are the types of places that people would often be walking to, or we'd like them to walk to if they can, rather than driving. So, especially if it's in your neighborhood. So I believe that's why I wasn't part of that policy decision. So,
is the city considering changing the zoning code to require larger setbacks in new development and in order to provide wide sidewalks and shade trees.
Yes. That was an easy one.
At the intersection of 301 and Mound,
yeah, this was
it's
the
a
one that came up earlier.
problem intersection already. If you have the construction of the Symphony Hall there, how would the traffic issues be affected?
I don't know yet, but there would probably be some change in traffic patterns due to the orchestra going in. So that's definitely something that there would have to be a traffic study done to analyze. I think that the use would be slightly different from, the tennis courts that are mostly used during the day to the orchestra. That would be, a lot of their stuff happens at night, I believe.
The changes brought about in traffic patterns, especially Fruitville, with the roundabout in Tamiami Trail and Gulf Boulevard to Longboat Key. This person wants to have you explain how this is going to be an advantage to put a roundabout there.
At Fruitville and Gulfstream?
Yeah.
Well, I'll say this. So I know that people are really worried that when you drive through that intersection that this is going to slow you down, and the truth is it will probably slow you down a little bit. While the intersection, both of those are going to be designed so that cars can keep moving, we're trying to balance the needs of multiple users of our transportation system. And those two locations are really prime areas where there's a lot of different users of the transportation system moving through. You've got bicyclists, you've got people on foot, and you've got cars all trying to use the same place at the same time. And that is really tricky to design for. These roundabouts are designed to make it a little bit safer for bicyclists and pedestrians while also keeping the cars moving efficiently. And I think that it's really about balance. So that's my best answer on that. The DOT are the ones who are building the project at Gulfstream at the city's request. But that is what I have heard them discuss with the town of Longboat Key commissioners, is we're trying to balance different needs here. And people on foot are vulnerable out there, and we do have a lot of people walking, whether it's safe or not right now. And we did before that, the pedestrian signal went in, people were I would see them all the time just standing there where there's hardly a median. And it's not safe for drivers, it's not safe for pedestrians, that's no good for anybody, so.
The city has had some long-range planning in the past, and I participated in several of them. Are you going to be running this study like that, where you will have lots of opportunities for people to participate and to have a say in the things that are analyzed?
Yes, that's why I think at the beginning I mentioned there's going to be public input opportunities throughout the process, because it's great for the public to have some input at this stage, when we're looking at different scenarios, but it's also really important for the public to have input at the stage when we're prioritizing the projects and deciding which ones we're going to build and when. And so, yes, there will be opportunities throughout the process for people to weigh in, both in person and online.
This person draws attention to the safety issues of having the pedestrian crossing signals synchronized with the traffic signals rather than separately. Would you consider stopping the practice of running the walk light at the same time traffic turns into the crosswalk. Traffic turns, this is considered, has been seen to be very dangerous and provokes lots of bad behavior and pedestrians suffering from attacks by drivers and criticism by drivers. And then,
it can be very intimidating when a car's coming at you while you're crossing the street with the walk signal. There's this thing called the lead pedestrian indicator light, and so the idea is it gives the white walk signal for a pedestrian before the light turns green for a car to go straight through. I know that kind of messes with the signal timing optimization, and so this is another thing where we need to figure out what the right balance is to make sure we're giving people who are on foot the protection they need while also keeping traffic moving smoothly through the city. And any little tweak you make to the signals can cause huge repercussions in other parts of the network. So it's definitely something that we've been discussing internally, and we're looking at how that could get implemented in a way that would make a difference.
A lot of people are confounded by the red lights and the yellow lights at First Street.
Yeah.
And they're not familiar with flashing red lights here because they haven't really been used at intersections much.
Yeah.
Can you explain the cycles and what the pedestrian and what the car can do in those circumstances?
Yes. So the new Hawk signal, it's a hybrid flashing beacon signal that's here near the Ritz-Carlton on 41, is a new thing for Sarasota. I think we're actually one of the first in the whole FDOT district, District 1, to have something like this as a mid-block crossing. So this is totally new. Before we put it in, DOT wasn't even sure how it would work, if traffic would continue to flow and what the timing would look like. But I think the general thing I've heard is that it's been pretty successful as far as giving people some protection if they're using it properly to cross the street. So as a pedestrian, you press the button, you have to wait until you get the signal. The lights turn red, and a car is supposed to stop at the stop bar. So if you, as a motorist, see that somebody is standing there waiting about to push the button, you might try and hold back a little bit so that you can stop at the stop bar when they're ready, so that actually gives people the ability to cross. But the light turns red for a certain amount of time, a few seconds, as the person's crossing the street, and then it starts to flash red. And if it's flashing red, you can proceed through the intersection if there's no one walking through the crosswalk. And then once it stops flashing, you proceed carefully. But a flashing red light in a lot of places means treat it like a stop sign. So if there's nobody there, you can keep going. That is something that not everybody understands yet, and I've been seeing people out there, they keep waiting even though the light's flashing. That is kind of impeding traffic a bit. So help me and talk to people about it. If people are saying, I don't understand what the signal is, please explain to them, or send them to me, because we have these little brochure cards that explain to people how to use them. But
is there a video on it that we can put on the CONA website?
There is.
Well, I'll put a link on that.
Great.
Okay. Well, I really want to thank you for the presentation. When is the next meeting in this process of getting the plan started?
Our next public meeting is going to be at the beginning of June. The details are still being confirmed because I'm trying to lock down our meeting location, but stay tuned for that, tentatively for June 4th. It's a Tuesday.
Are you going to accommodate working people to be able to get to it?
That is the goal. So we're looking at hosting it in the evening.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.